Good evening and welcome to Perspective. As the world marks International Peace Day, a very significant development with UK, Canada and Australia announcing formal recognition of the state of Palestine, with David Lemmy, the Deputy Prime Minister of UK, saying now is the time to stand up to two-state solution. Let's hear what was said today.
This process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
Intends to recognise the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality.
And a little later on, our very own Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to represent Pakistan at the 80th anniversary of the UNGA. And he's also expected to meet a select group of Muslim leaders in a meeting with the US President. We'll be talking about the ramifications of these meetings, their effect as far as this session also, and what kind of a ripple effect do we see as far as this particular meeting is concerned. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Saqlain Imam, who's a former BBC editor and a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Imam. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What are the key reasons that you see behind this new development as far as, of course, Canada, the UK and Australia, of course, and for a while, of course, we've been looking at this shift as far as Europe is concerned. And now, of course, the UK follows suit. How do you see it?
First of all, I must, basically highlight one thing, that currently we're talking about the Anglo-speaking, which means English-speaking countries, Britain, Canada, Australia. But we are forgetting another important country, which has also announced the same, and they're going to recognize tomorrow the same Palestinian state. It is France. Emmanuel Macron has also announced that they will recognize Palestinian state. But the basic thing we have to understand, that all these recognition of Palestinian state are conditioned. And all conditions are on Palestinian state or Palestinian Authority, which means Hamas cannot contest the election, and you have to bring reforms within the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority doesn't have any resources. Palestinian Authority's money funds are scuttled by the United States and other international agencies. And Hamas, of course, represent the major part of Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. So these conditions show it's a diplomatic victory for Palestinian state, but practically it is not going to give them much relief, because they cannot stop Israel from the currently going on genocidal war in Gaza. They cannot stop the Jewish settlements in the West Bank occupied areas, which is occupied Palestinian areas. Moreover, nobody is talking about the settlements which Jews of Israel have already encroached on the West Bank. So they are about, you can say, more than 750,000 Jewish settlers are living on the occupied lands after making hundreds of their settlements, legal settlements, and there are many other settlements which are not legal, which are just, you go carry out like a westernization of the...
But Mr. Imam, when you talk about this as a diplomatic victory, of course, hasn't there been a shift, like you said, of course, when we talk about Europe, and of course we talk about France, we talk about, other European countries, the shift has been there for a while. With this new development, as far as the UK is concerned, of course, Australia, Canada, do you think that this, even if we call it a diplomatic victory, do you think it shows that perhaps the world is perhaps more amenable or more willing to acknowledge that there is only one solution to this conflict?
Well, solutions could be defined. What is the solution? So that's a different issue. But it's definitely a big shift in the world opinion. And that has happened. The major factor of that is Gaza war. So you can't, basically ignore that factor, because the atrocities, the genocidal war which Israel is executing at the moment, and since October, 2023, the world opinion is shifting. Many Western countries, capitals, major cities, young people can see.
I want to come to this particularly because, for a while, of course, there has been a shift, as you said, in public opinion. When we talk about what's happening in Palestine, we talk about the brutality in Palestine, we talk about the killings, the inhumanity that is at display for the world to see. But do you think that this shift will continue and it will have a broad, effect elsewhere in the world also? Or do you think that, of course, that one country that matters, I'll come to that later, but do you see it sort of resonating all over?
I think you have pointed out the most important thing, that is one country, that matters. Because that country, which means the United States of America, if it vetoes at the Security Council the membership of Palestinian state, everything is blocked. So the whole exercise of recognizing Palestinian state, already 150, around 150, there are different, way of calculating these numbers. Some say 145, some say 150. So these countries have already recognized Palestinian state. And of course, the global south has recognized Palestinian state. It is the Western societies which are now they have started recognizing it. And of course, Spain has recognized it already. Many Scandinavian countries have recognized already. So these Britain and Canada, Australia, France, they are actually, because of their differences and because of the public opinion pressure. For instance, the Labour Party, which is the ruling party, and the Keir Starmer is Prime Minister of that government and leader of the Labour Party, they are facing internal pressure. And of course, across the country, they are facing huge, tremendous pressure. Even Labour Party can dismember, can disintegrate if they do not show any, strength or support for Palestinian people. So again,
so you're saying that they're within the UK, because of course, we all witnessed those huge rallies that were held, that have been held, that continue to be held for the Palestinian cause all over UK, and that has happened actually all over the world. So you think that domestic pressure is itself one of the reasons to propel the UK and of course other countries. So then is it too much to expect the US to sort of also follow this path, or perhaps move towards it at the very least?
First of all, if we see that it's a public pressure and of course internal politics of Labour Party and of course the mounting public pressure of British people, especially the young generation, that of course is a great pressure on the governments and authorities and the state. But again, the state are recognizing Palestinian state, where what you say in an English expression, the fly in an ointment. When you recognize Palestinian state, you should simply say we recognize Palestinian state. But these governments have put conditions, discard Hamas, reforms your government, and many other things. And of course, nobody's talking about the Jewish settlements, because in the present circumstances, the Jewish settlements are so much prevalent in the occupied territories of Palestine or Palestinian Authority that 70% of those areas which were part of, or which have been part of Palestinian state or Palestinian Authority or occupied land, now the 70% of that area is now under the
So do you think that I'm going to interject, but do you think that this is going to affect as far as the relationship of the UK, for example, with Israel, and of course the SOPs, for example, with regard to Israel and UK and their diplomatic relations at all as far as this move is concerned? Because earlier on also, of course, there were some conditionalities that were given out that, of course, Israel also failed to meet.
Israel has failed to meet any condition which they tried to put on. But the issue is, Israel has not complied with any kind of demands which the West or the UK or Australia or Canada have set for. But if Israel has failed to comply with any of their demands, did they take any action? They simply said that they would recognize Palestinian state. But did any of them stop supplying arms to Israel? No. UK simply suspended 30 companies' licenses which have been providing some component supply to Israel, but there are more than 350 licenses which are still operating from UK, and they all supply licenses of weapons and components of weapons, or for F-35 or F-16, something like that.
Say that in a sense, this is a more cosmetic kind of move. It's more about how it looks to the world than having any real meat to it, as you said. Because the other kind of collaborations are still going on, which are very effective, like you said, as far as weapons are concerned, supplying those, and their other dealings are concerned. So it's more cosmetic when you look at what's actually happened. Or do you think that's too pessimistic a view to take right now?
I won't say it's a simply cosmetic, because it's a crossing a line. So they have crossed a line. They have recognized Palestinian state by annoying Israel, but they haven't taken any step to basically stop Israel from the war which they still continue to carry out in Gaza. They have not stopped Israel from carrying out genocide. They have not stopped Israel or Jewish settlements from encroaching further upon the occupied lands of Palestine. And of course, they cannot put pressure on the United States, because the internal pressure in the United States, of course, the youth pressure is growing. But again, the system, the Congress, the media, the think tanks, the financial institutions, and you must have heard the name Israel lobby, is so powerful in the United States that they cannot go to annoy Israel. No president of the US at the moment can afford to annoy Israel. So the Israel is recognized by the huge majority of the members of the United Nations, but a Palestinian state still cannot become member of the United Nations as full member of that international body unless United States of America allows it.
Do you think that it's likely to influence any future negotiations, for example, with Israel, as far as this recognition is concerned?
Of course. Now, if so many countries have recognized Palestinian state, if they sit in front of Israel, they will be treated as a country, as a state, as a sovereign state. But again, if Israel is backed by the United States, then everything fall flat.
But in terms of, like you said, there are still international, obligations. There's still the question of status as far as international law is concerned. So whereas this recognition does come with conditionalities, it does give the Palestine state, that status, like you said. But the question again of it influencing the US, how do you see, of course, there is the Israel lobby, but there is also this pressure. Do you think that there are chances that the US government might have to, thaw a little? Of course, we've also had the recent meetings between the US and the UK officials. How do you look at that dynamic shaping this?
I can't exactly say what's likely to happen in the United States, because the whole system is geared up in such a way that it always protects Israeli interests. Media education institutions and universities, think tanks, financial institutions, political institutions. You can see if an Israeli prime minister visits US Congress, he receives more standing ovation than the US president himself. So the power of Israel on the United States is much more than even the local American leaders on their own political system. So at the moment, I can't say there can be a possible thaw or change or shift in US policies vis-a-vis Israel or Palestinian state or Palestinian Authority, what you say. At the moment, it's not the Palestinian state or Palestinian Authority is not full member of the United Nations, so they are not in the United Nations as sovereign state. They are sitting there as observer. So with that observer status.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Imam. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be taking a short break, after which we'll come back and talk about what this really means for the world when we look at the recognitions that are coming in as far as Palestine is concerned. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We have Yasmin Qureshi, who's UK MP Labour Party, joining us from UK. Yasmin, can you hear us?
Gee, I can.
Yasmin, we're looking at this development as far as UK recognizing Palestine state. First of all, how is overall, how is it looking? What are the feelings overall as far as this recognition is concerned? And then, of course, there's also a lot being said in terms of the conditionalities attached to it. But first of all, how is it looking? How is it feeling in the UK as far as this recognition is concerned?
Everyone is absolutely delighted that the Prime Minister has recognised the state of Palestine, and that means the United Kingdom now has recognised the state of Palestine, which is a tremendous news. As you know, when the Balfour Declaration was made all those years ago, they said there would be a state of split. I can hear some. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Right. The Balfour Declaration ने था कि भाई इसराइल को भी स्टेट लेके पैलेस्टाइन का तो बहुत सालों बाद अब फाइनली रिकॉग्नाइज हो गया and that is बहुत अच्छी बात है. Obviously challenges have many challenges because
with me in English. Yes, Yasmin, could you please stay with me in English? As far as this development is concerned, like you said, of course, it's very welcome, and but there's also a lot of conditions attached to it. Do you think that it's more than and there are those that are calling it symbolism? How would you answer that?
I think yes, people can say that, but I think the decision that has been taken did not come easy. The official opposition of the United Kingdom are still against it. There's also many people against even this recognition. I don't think it's symbolic. I think it's a big change in the United Kingdom's political history. It's diplomatic relations because, for example, as you know, UK policy is very much aligned with the USA. And on this occasion, they've taken a completely different picture, different stance in comparison to what the USA has said. And I think the fact that it happened along with Australia and other countries united together, it really is important that we recognize. I mean, they said it's done on the 1967 border with equal land swap. So we know what the territory is, which is what some people are saying, well, how can we have a state of Palestine if you don't know what the area is? Well, we do know it's the 67 border, the 67 agreement that everybody knows, which has
as far as the decision itself is concerned, and how, of course, we're looking at a lot of public pressure for a while that was building up, not just in the UK, but all over. And of course, the shift has been all over as far as the European countries are concerned, with the UK now, of course, and other countries like Australia, Canada. But in terms of the future, Do you think that this perhaps extending to other countries? Do you see this perhaps having, a more effect on perhaps that one country that of course also really counts as far, and of course I mean the US? Right, I think there was a problem with audio. Thank you so much, Yasmin. Thank you for your very valuable input as far as this is concerned. We're going to be moving on, and we'll have with us Sardar Masood Khan, who's former ambassador to USA. He's former AJK president and former permanent rep for Pakistan to the UN. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your very valuable time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sardar, how will this overall, when we look at this shift, when we look at this change at this time that has come, and of course, the way that the world is at this time looking at it, do you think that this is going to, how is it going to play out for the world? And of course, Netanyahu's statement also that we've seen, and its own effect, the way that the world has seen. First of all, how do you see it? Let's go with that, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, it is, as a matter of fact, but there was a lot of pressure from the British citizens. There were several demonstrations there, lively attended demonstrations. So there was a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister, and he had to take that decision. And that's why he took it. In fact, I mean, the governments in most of the Western countries, West European countries, have been taking this decision reluctantly because they were strategically aligned with the United States and also with Israel. So it was a very difficult decision for Mr. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom. And in a joint press conference with President Trump, you would recall that President Trump publicly said that he disagreed with the decision which the United Kingdom had taken. So it's a significant decision, but I also think that it's an empty gesture because the state of Palestine, as it was conceived in the UN Security Council resolutions, is being erased before our eyes. Because you have occupied Palestinian territory, which has no authority, no autonomy, and now you have Gaza, which is being obliterated, and which would be, in fact, another occupied Israeli territory, where they are trying to displace people from their homes and hearths.
As far as, of course, this development is concerned, it's also a conditional one, right? And we've also seen that, it has legal and diplomatic implications. Are there those to consider at this time, as far as your opinion is concerned, as far as these diplomatic implications, as far as the world is concerned, as far as the UK itself also, of course, that those conditions and the future of them?
I think that there's no legal barrier. The Russian foreign minister asked the United Kingdom and France that, why are you making it conditional? If you want to recognize the Palestinian state, why wait till the high-level segment of the United Nations General Assembly session? So I think that this is also disingenuous, this gesture. As I said, that this can be an empty gesture because realities on the ground are being changed drastically. And as far as Israel is concerned, as far as the United States is concerned, who backs Israel, these changes are irreversible.
But for a while, we've been looking at a shift in Europe also. And the fact that there is likely, one hopes at least, that this will have a larger ripple effect as far as the world is concerned. Do you think that's likely, considering, of course, that there is a clear public opinion for Palestine all over the world at this time?
No, in fact, the Western European countries are subservient and very respectful and deferential to the decisions which were taken by Washington. Washington doesn't need West Europe. It needs, of course, I mean, they are it has very cordial and strong ties with the European Union countries, and they're also, and most of the European Union countries are members of NATO. So they have security alliance and they have interdependence, but at the same time, West European capitals will kowtow to the United States, not the other way around. So this is one thing, and therefore I think that if the veto right now in this regard, in regard to Palestine emerging as an independent and sovereign state with a contiguous state and based on the borders, pre-1967 borders, the veto is in the hands of President Trump and the United States of America.
When we talk about recognition of a state, of course, it has international law parameters, it has international law obligations. So that, of course, do you think will have a significant effect, of course, on the status of Palestine, even if there are these conditions?
I don't think so. I mean, the international law has been sidelined. It has been trampled in case of Palestine, case of Gaza, after October the 7th, 2023. Before that also, but more flagrantly after 2023. So genocide has taken place there. People are being starved. Starvation is being used as an instrument of war. All humanitarian laws have been violated. So I think that international law has not been invoked. It has been explained away by the Israelis or by the United States spokespersons, but it has not been applied to Gaza at all. And we're seeing the devastation of Gaza or the state of Palestine on live screens. It is being recorded. But at the same time, there is no intervention. The United Nations Security Council has not been able to intervene under Chapter 7 or take measures that would stop Israel from acquiring more territory, displacing the people of, or destroying and displacing the people of Gaza. So I think that international law, as you said, is not relevant to the situation.
Fair enough. Of course, I want to move on and talk about, of course, the UNGA and their 80th anniversary meet. Of course, Prime Minister of Pakistan is also going to be there, and there are, of course, all these meetings that are scheduled there also. At this time, of course, you know, there are those things that one has to reflect on as far as the UNGA is concerned. Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development and human rights. Of course, that is what is being said at this time, but it's also a time where we're looking at, like we just spoke about Palestine, we're looking at the tyranny there, we're looking at the brutality there, and yet $1 trillion have been spent by the UN since 1945 in poverty reduction, development. In your perspective, how do you assess whether this theme genuinely reflects the lessons that have been learned from the UN's past shortcomings, for example?
Well, let's look at the strengths and weaknesses of the United Nations objectively, and I'd say that they have achieved positive results even in the realm of security, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s. It was in the 1950s that they were able to pass resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir. So I think that, but with the passage of time, the United States, United Nations, and especially United Nations Security Council's authority to resolve conflicts or disputes has been eroded, and by the permanent 5 members, particularly the United States and its allies, France and the United Kingdom, because they have absolute hold over the Security Council because they have veto-wielding powers. But in other areas, I mean, contrary to what you have suggested, I would say that the United Nations have been making progress. Poverty alleviation, you said. It has not been eliminated, but it has been alleviated, and the United States has, United Nations has done a good job. Similarly, advocacy for adjusting our economies to the climate change challenges, sustainable development. I think that the United Nations has made progress. But I think United Nations is hamstrung because of the security architecture, the overarching security architecture, which dominates the UN Security Council.
As far as the UNGA is concerned, of course, it's brokered decolonialization also of over 80 nations. It's advanced 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There's enforcement gaps that unfortunately yet still persist. In your view, what are the Assembly's most enduring successes? And some of them, of course, you said that, of course, they've made some difference as far as poverty alleviation is concerned and other areas. But as far as peacekeeping is concerned, as far as human rights are concerned, you know, how relevant are they in these shifting geopolitical realities?
Well, the United Nations has not been a very good peacemaker, but it has been a good peacekeeper. I'd say that they have peacekeeping troops all around the world, and they also have catalyzed peace building in the troubled zones, whether they are in Africa or Latin America, Asia, in Europe also, the Balkans. And so the record is good, but not in peacemaking, although they used to be very active in the 1950s and 1960s. Let's also not forget that United Nations played a very significant role during the decolonization period, and also mainstreaming the concept of the right to self-determination. So these are the successes, but peacemaking, as I said, is a difficult job, and there the veto building powers have absolute monopoly. So nothing can happen without their consent.
Right. On September 12th, the UNGA endorsed the New York Declaration, demanding Hamas disarmament, exclusion from Gaza's governance, an immediate ceasefire. With bombardments in Gaza City still intensifying as we talk right now, with the situation what it is as far as Palestine is concerned, you know, how viable is the roadmap for a two-state solution? Of course, we've also seen recognitions come in today which are significant, which is what we were earlier talking about. But how should the international community engage, you know, to avoid another stalemate and to, you know, of course, intensifying this crisis of humongous proportions?
Though this resolution was co-sponsored by France and Saudi Arabia, and it is considered to be perceived to be a very sincere initiative taken by the two countries, and some 142 countries voted in favor of this resolution. Already 146 countries recognize the state of Palestine. And it's two-thirds majority, more than two-thirds majority. It's almost three-fourths of the United Nations membership endorses the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state. But I think that, as I mentioned earlier, that if you're disarming Hamas and you are disenfranchising it altogether, that it would have no governance role in Hamas, it would be taken over by Israel. It is being taken over by Israel right now. And what they're doing is that they're preparing it for rebuilding Gaza without Gazans or Palestinians there, and to settle Jews from all over Europe and other parts of, and from Israel as well. I mean, they're authorizing the establishment, illegal settlements there. So if Hamas is disarmed, the occupied Palestinian territory is already disarmed, then you have, and in between Gaza and occupied Palestinian territory, you have Israeli territory. So there would be no contiguity. And if you don't have contiguity, and if you don't have armed forces, how can you create a sovereign state? Saudi Arabia has been persistently pursuing this proposal of a solid, time-bound, and irreversible commitment from the United States and from other members of the Security Council for the creation of a Palestinian state. I mean, it's called two-state solution. But Israel is not prepared to endorse a two-state solution or a one-state solution, because in a hypothetical one-state solution, Palestinians in due course would outnumber the Israelis. So,
as far as Pakistan and India are concerned, of course, after April 22nd, the Pahalgam attack that killed 25 Indian tourists escalated into cross-border strikes with, of course, India accusing Pakistan without any proof. There were concerns of nuclear brinkmanship, and what specific mechanisms, in your opinion, within the UA or broader UN system could realistically, in your opinion, help de-escalate Indo-Pak tensions, prevent future crises from spiraling out of control? Because in this case, of course, we haven't really been able to see that kind of effectiveness. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, there has been temporary de-escalation, and we're thankful to the United States of America for intervening and making peace. It's not peace, in fact, brokering the ceasefire. And we're grateful to the United States, and our leadership has thanked President Trump and Mr. Marco Rubio, Vice President Vance, for what they did during that war. But India still remains aggressive. It has said that it has paused aggression against Pakistan, but it has not ceased it, which means that it's a live situation. It was raised in the Security Council, but the Security Council discussions did not produce a result. I mean, did not produce a product or a statement or a resolution. And so both are nuclear weapon states. I mean, in the developments between India and Pakistan are watched very closely by the Security Council and the General Assembly. So I think that under Chapter 6, there can be many intercessions that are made by the United Nations. Would it make those intercessions? I'm not so sure about it because of the complexity of the world politics. But the issue would be raised in the third committee of the General Assembly. Then it would be the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, would be raised by the Prime Minister of Pakistan in his address to the General Assembly, and also later a resolution on the right to self-determination would be presented in the General Assembly plenary and passed there. So I think that we have very limited scope, and on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, our Prime Minister is likely to meet President Trump, and he had offered mediation after the May war between India and Pakistan. So if there is mediation, there is intercession. Let's not call it mediation, because India is neuralgic to any kind of third-party involvement in issues related to India and Pakistan. But if there is intercession by the United States, probably doors could be opened for a dialogue between India and Pakistan. But what is imperative here is that India has to descend from its high horse, and on a level playing field, it has to engage Pakistan. And we have always made overture after overture, and we have made many offers for negotiations and diplomacy. But India's posture is aggressive against Pakistan, and even India's friends have not been able to persuade it to enter into a meaningful, result-oriented dialogue with Pakistan.
Right. Thank you so much, Sardar Masood Khan. Thank you so much for your very valuable time. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. We would like to thank Saqlain Imam also for joining us today, Yasmin Qureshi for being with us for this very important development today. We spoke about the UK recognizing the state of Palestine, among other countries, and its own development ramifications overall as far as this recognition is concerned. Of course, it does come with conditionalities, and it'll have to be seen how the world views this, and of course one hopes that it will have a ripple effect. Later on, we talked about the UNGA, and as it meets, is it scheduled to meet for its 80th anniversary? Of course, there are questions about its effectiveness and whether it has made a significant amount of difference as far as its goals were concerned. And of course, where poverty alleviation, there are areas in which we see a significant difference. Peacekeeping, when we look at what is happening around the world, leaves a lot to be desired. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.